This week, we talk with Cody Wood from Signal Sciences. In the news segment, we process a new side channel of the dead, examine some fangs on Bluetooth, resurrect an OS, reanimate a UX, and more. Stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW.
Welcome to Application Security Weekly. This is episode 62, recorded May 20th, 2019. I'm your host, Mike Shema, and I'm here with John Kinsella. Hey, John.
Hey, Mike. Happy Monday. How are you?
Happy Monday. Looks like Matt has left us for the excitement of Cloud Native Con in Barcelona, so I think he's having tapas and wine is what I suspect.
I'm so jealous.
I know. Register for our upcoming webcasts with Kinsella, Logarithm, Domain Tools, and SaltStack by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you have missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find our on-demand library at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Security Weekly is returning to Vegas this August for Black Hat and DEF CON. If you would like to request a briefing or sponsor an interview on site at Black Hat, please go to securityweekly.com/booking and submit your request. Today, we have Cody Wood from Signal Sciences. Cody is a JDirt miner turned application security fanatic. Often straddling multiple departments and roles, the AppSec bug bit Cody in Houston, Texas at the Threat Research Center working for White Hat Security. Cody has also worked for brief periods in both builder and breaker roles. At Signal Sciences, he currently focuses on researching and expanding Signal Sciences' vulnerability-specific rules coverage. Hey, Cody, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mike, how's it going? Thanks for having me. Looking forward to a conversation and talking about security today.
Yeah, this sounds like it'll be fun. You've got quite a different background, a varied background, I'd say. Your path into AppSec, comes from a quite physical environment, not really just software. Maybe let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I used to work in mining operations. We mined a mineral called hectorite. It's a mineral that's used in like paint, things like that, and that's sort of a different lifetime now I look at. But I've been going to school off and on for computer science. It always generally been interested in security, but I'd been using some of the industrial control systems stuff, and that was around the time that Stuxnet came out. And so then I realized, like, really, this is a huge field. Cybersecurity is a thing. It's a job you can go get. That wasn't really something that I ever went through with my high school counselor. And so I kind of had my mindset on that and went to programming boot camp actually out in Houston, Texas. And that's where I met some people from White Hat Security. And that was really my first foot in the door on the application security industry. And it didn't until later realize that a lot of my experience in industrial environments actually do have some applicability to security. And it's been awesome, just kind of a nice ride ever since. Been working in different roles, both blue team and working at vendors. I get, work at Signal Sciences now, worked at Rapid7, and then also worked at NBC and another PCI payment processor doing their internal application security stuff. So I've had some pretty good experience in that specific field, and it's been a really wild trip. And best part has been really the community. They're very helpful, and it's been quite kind of a wild ride.
That's pretty cool, and we'll get to we'll work our way towards the signal sciences part because I think that's one of those tools that's really enabled DevOps and DevSecOps to have some security functionality in their apps. But even with that background where you're coming from, you're mentioning the AppSec community. I imagine that it's actually not necessarily a complete 180 shift from industrial safety to modern AppSec. I suspect there's actually some overlap there, especially in concepts and in working with people and taking people into account in terms of security and safety.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've seen articles recently, especially security people that are like, "Oh, I failed." By the way, it's like, well, yeah, everybody fails, and like it's sort of this like new novel concept of analyzing failures, but really, that sort of research has been done for a long time in industrial control environments, air traffic control, anything like that, where failures are usually life threatening or can cause mortality rates. Basically, the analysis of failure in complex systems has been something that was sort of core to it working in an industrial environment, and uniquely actually has a lot to do with what we do at Signal Sciences. And it's really this idea of just kind of analyzing failure from like a human standpoint. It's why did someone make a decision they did given the conditions they were in? So hindsight is always very very clear. We can see 2020. So looking back, we can always see where the failure points were, and like, well, if we do root cause analysis and we cut off the root cause, then none of the chain of events ever would have happened. It doesn't really work that way. We at Signal Science just try to focus on the idea of just providing as much information to people as we can, so that when mistakes, and really like in the security world, a mistake is either leaving a vulnerability there or not responding to one quick enough or things like that. And so when those failures happen, our ability to respond to them is essential. And sort of doing that, you have to develop this a better form of empathy. And so you just kind of empathize with the people that were participating in some action when a failure happened. And so in the industrial world, like when I was working mining, we did what was called behavioral safety. And so it was behaviors that lead to bad safety practices. And so these behaviors were things like not like housekeeping, just not cleaning up an area. These could be things like leaving a forklift without the parking brake on, even if it's on level ground. So there's certain things that we can start to look at. It's like, well, what was that person thinking? And then moving in that security world, we realized in security, especially web application firewalls, that they were very difficult to deploy. So what's the likelihood that if we buy an expensive security product, that somebody's going to turn it on or leave it on or use it in the way that we intended if it's so difficult to use? And so sort of what we try to take is a very empathetic approach. It's like, I don't want to deal with tons of alerts. I want to be able to turn something on and use it safely before I can figure out how it's going to protect the environment. And so those sort of industrial concepts started to bring over some of the ideas that I had around security. And then also I found out Signal Sciences kind of developed this. It's how do we become empathetic with our customers, with our users, regardless if they're in security, development, or operations? How can we make a security vendor product that's consumable for everything? Just a great product. We don't have to add the moniker. It's a great security product.
Yeah, I think that aspect of go ahead, John.
I think that's what you just said at the end there, Cody, is really hits the nail on the head. If I can speak here. It's the user experience, right? But I think the way you're talking about that is actually really interesting from a point of view of what. And there's a question for you. You've been in the industrial side. You've seen that. You've got some great experience on both sides of that fence now. And you said something there, which is near and dear to my heart, and comes back to that the UX of this. There's so much data which can come out of a modern IT infrastructure. But at the same time, we're starting to see that come from modern industrial, right? You think like, the story of like GE comes to my head with their, I can't remember if it's public, but the amount of data which gets downloaded off of a jet engine when that plane lands nowadays is pretty insane. What was sort of, have you found that to be overwhelming, just coming up to speed with that just pure volume of data? Or, how do you deal with that either at Signal Sciences or outside?
Yeah, so there's companies that have been dealing with the big data problem before we really called it big data. They're like, that's just
Sure.
what we do. That's why we're in business. I think in the industrial world, you do not everything transfers. So in the industrial world, if I had an overwhelming amount of alerts and things like that, I could go physically check the system. We don't actually get that opportunity working in the IT world. We only get data. We only get an outside perspective. We only see that. And so what we action on has to have a lot more fidelity. It has to be highly controlled, trustable. I have to know where it's coming from. Luckily, like if I had a panel that was feeding me bad information or I even assumed it was bad, I could go physically check the device. Is this really what it is? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Some, anything like that, I could physically check. In the IT world, yes, we're dealing with like large amounts of data. How do we deal with that? I think at Signal Sciences, the way we've approached it is a lot of our dashboarding is just really unique, and it allows you this high level, immediate perspective. We don't really like use that whole was it the single pane of glass kind of thing. It's still kind of that, but it's the idea of giving you actionable insights right away and then allowing users to drill down to the deepest level that they can within our system. So if you find something, you can navigate down to the actual single request that was made and then go through timelines of events that triggered it, what happened before that was added to the list. So you get a lot of fidelity once something is triggered as an attack in our environment. Does that help kind of explain how we deal with the large amounts of IT, generated IT data?
Yeah, I think so. And this is one of those ongoing questions. I think over the next half hour, we'll probably sort of dive down a little more about how, some of the technology you guys have come up with and how that sort of helps with that load. It's one comment before I pass over to Mike on the, you're mentioning in the industrial world, you're able to go out on site and actually, poke the thing sometimes and see if it's a good thing, or if it's up and running, or if your sensor's bad. I just started watching Chernobyl on HBO last night. It's not always you actually want to go out to the industrial site and actually check what's going on, but yeah, still it's good that you can do that.
Yeah, when they were coming back with the like 3rd-degree sunburns, that was pretty shocking.
Yeah, possibly a metaphor for many a code review as well. But but I think what the two kind of themes that were emerging here, that you called out explicitly, Cody, was that idea of like empathy. And if something went wrong, like trying to figure out what went wrong. Was it because people weren't cleaning up? And we can also build our metaphors with AppSec right there. Were they just not using input valid or output encoding? Were they not doing, were they using a weaker configuration? As well as one of the things too, it sounds like this is also a bit of a blameless process as we're talking here. Not to say that there shouldn't be accountability, but trying to discover where did a process break down or what happened needs to have some of that exploration. And I think part of that also builds another thing you've been talking about is that credibility. And that ties back to what you and John were just saying about there's a big difference between getting dumped with a lot of data and actually here's the one you care about. So I'm curious with like Signal Sciences and how it builds credibility with like DevOps teams. How many people are running a WAF, something like Signal Sciences in your experience, and actually blocking traffic? Because that is one of the easiest ways to build, or for that matter, lose credibility.
Yeah, so I think this is on our site. It's over 90% of our customers are in blocking mode, and I will say that there are some of our customers that they are in non-blocking, but they still use some of our functionality and rules to block. So we sort of departed from the whole legacy architecture where you block IPs. We block based on a threshold, and then we also block on malicious requests or certain types of requests. We can block immediately as well. So the fundamental approach is just different. We don't block IPs outright, and then to kind of connect the two pieces, the empathy and the credibility. All of our tool is really built off of the two key parts that cause the most false positives, I would say: cross-site scripting and SQL injection, and command execution as well. Lib injection is what handles that, and a lot of mod security uses that. A lot of open source tools rely on like lib injection. It's better detections than relying on regex or things like that. And I think on the empathy side, as security security vendors, we heard what our customers wanted. They're like, they want to cover this attack and that attack and this attack. And then we thought we were empathizing by giving them a huge library of attacks and all these different attacks for them to configure. And that was a problem, though. I think for operations realizing immediate value, they need simple things in order to get it out there, get it working, and then be able to revisit it later once it's actually started doing things. So one approach we take is we don't have like this huge library of rules where it's like keyword based. And then if you get a keyword one plus this other one, then it escalates a score on it. And then you have to remember the score to calculate it backwards. And we don't really add those complexities in. Customers could totally add that level of complexity in if they can manage it. But that's not something that most operations or development teams want to ever manage. We do give them the capabilities to do that, though. And so the credibility comes from lib injections, better detection, really, of the cross-site scripting and SQL injection. And then on the empathy side is like, well, we want people to be able to act and take to block on these things, but how do they do it in an intelligent way? And how do they ramp up protections in dynamic environments? So everyone's application is changing. Even if you do some sort of learning and then a baseline mode, and then you turn on attacks, it's like your application could have been completely different 30 days ago. The baseline is a moot point. You have to rerun it again. What's the point if you have to keep relearning it and keep training it when it gives you the ability to filter out when you want to take actions on that threshold? So I think that's how we kind of bridge that credibility. We give them actionable data. These are things that are pretty reliable, and we also allow the ability to tune things that aren't reliable. So if you take JavaScript in your application, it's going to flag as cross-site scripting. Like, it's just a very common thing that's going to happen, I think, with any web application firewalls. And so we just give customers a lot of ability to control what our roles do and how they act and the rate that they act, and just give them a lot more actionable things. And I think that's something that the legacy WAF market's been missing for a long time. Is there was empathy, but it was misplaced entirely. It was placed on the idea that they just wanted tons more attacks, and I think they're only listening to security people. And security people really just don't build that great of products. They build things for themselves. They're purpose-built tools. They're very specialized. But security, as we've seen over the years with headlines and everything, it's a team effort. It's something that everyone has to get on board with. It's something that everyone has to do together. And so we just try to make our product as approachable as possible, but we allow people to dig in as well. And then on the blameless side, really that's about our process internally. And I think how we deal with problems is if other companies or security vendors, if they have a problem with their product, if there's some issue, turnaround could be like months. At least the companies I worked at, it could be at least a month, a couple weeks, depending on the severity of the bug. One thing I've noticed at Signal Sciences is that when incidents happen, we take it from this blameless approach. Let's not blame whose fault it was or why it broke, because we're very like continuous integration. Like we're doing 10, 20 deploys a day kind of thing. It's very, very high velocity. And so if we were to stop and do these like sort of post-mortems or retrospectives where we're blaming people, it's going to slow us down because they're going to be hesitant to push code out that fast. And so we knew customers wanted like quick fixes and rapid iteration. So how do we approach it is via blameless postmortems or retrospectives. And that's the idea of not blaming anyone, but just getting an idea of all the events, the chained events that took place. Don't look at just the root cause. Look at the chain of events. Look at the conditions that they happened in. What was that person under stress? Did that affect them personally? Like, were they scared of what happened? Will they be hesitant to deploy things in the future? And so I think that's something that is a cultural shift that I think sets us apart from not just security vendors, but like as a company, that's how we approach things. And I know there's other companies that do it, and a lot of it was sourced from Etsy, where our founders came from. And so we follow a lot of the same principles around just software engineering and approaching a product versus a security product.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to, especially that reference to Etsy. They had come onto my radar when I'd seen how well they were tackling classes of bugs, and it was really neat just to see, that proto DevOps, DevSecOps approach for them to say, here's how we're getting rid of cross-site scripting. We have strong CSP deployed everywhere. Here is how we are enforcing, HTTPS everywhere, which is actually not, a non-trivial thing to do when you start to have complex environments. You need to rotate certs, these types of things. So that's pretty neat to see. And I think it also coming back to the idea of making decisions under pressure or when things go wrong. When you're trying to, speaking from a vendor perspective, if you're trying to sell a tool and build credibility, if there's something like a WAF or anything else, even if it's a scanner, at any time the quote unquote network becomes slow or something weird is happening, it's typically the security tools that start to get unplugged first, just because they're the unknowns or what's affecting this. So to be able to see that those tools modify quickly or be able to be updated quickly and react to what developers are doing rather than what the security people are doing, I think is a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah, and in our product, we boil up as much information as we can. I think we're as far as like agent metrics and things go like that, we have like how many garbage collections were run on the agent, providing development operations the tools and facilities they need to troubleshoot things is something that I've seen us to differentiate ourselves as well. It's focusing on not just the security user, because in a security product, the health or the garbage collections on an agent have very little relevance to a security analyst. But to a development or operations person, troubleshooting memory issues or troubleshooting performance or slowdown, to boil up that data and make it easily consumable via API, like that's thinking about your actual users. It's not just going to be security people.
Yeah, I think it's also a big difference between how cool and fun it is to be a pen tester, do like capture the flag type of exercises versus the blue team actually has to, maintain availability, maintain an uptime for these services, deal with garbage collection, a lot of these types of things. And I think you had, we had chatted before, you mentioned this remediate the flag approach from AppSec EU, showing how let's make the blue team side of things more interesting, or at least give them some more attention on the types of problems and challenges they're running into.
Yeah, that's definitely a trend I hope to pick up. I don't know any too many technical aspects of it, but it was AppSec EU last year. It was a RTF. So you have a normal capture of the flag. It's a red team or pen testers. They're attacking an environment, pulling flags out via reverse shell or whatever. So to remediate the flag, though, you kind of go through the proofing of that, but you also go in and patch the code. I know that I think it was WebGoat did a little bit of this, or in the code you could check the comments and things like that. I just really don't feel like there's been a lot of sort of energy put towards those types of events and those exercises. We have tons of CTFs and bug bounties and all these sort of red team fetishes or whatever, and blue team has not gotten the attention it deserves, and it really is. It's harder work, and it definitely is more boring, and it's not as rewarding, because if something works, then you don't know it. It just silently works, and that's the great thing about it. And so I think there should be more of that. Remediate the flag, I hope, is a push in that direction, where we start to as blue team people, as defenders, we start to share the knowledge we have. How do we protect systems? How do we get better at doing it? How do we understand them from end to end, and go from not only like exploiting a vulnerability to also patching it? And I think that's really the push in the cycle, is like development did it. They became full stack engineers, and these frameworks that end to end will manage web application. I think security sort of needs to go through that same evolution of not just being the security side of it. You should also be able to at least help, if not yourself, implement some of the fixes that you're recommending. And if you don't do that, you're never really going to gain that empathy. If you're dealing with scale issue, obviously you're going to have to pull in help, and you should be good at that, like communicating with people in order to rally the crew to fix things. But in some situations, you need to put forward the effort to fix things, and they'll make you understand how hard those things are to fix. And for me, that's where the empathy came from, is like, I would go ask a developer, can you fix this? I'm thinking in the back of my head, can I even fix this myself? Like, what would it take? How much effort is this going to take? And so when I started having those sort of thoughts, that really like I feel like AppSec is a little bit better about that, and we're getting better about not tossing reports over the wall and just handing them off to people.
Yeah. Not sure. John is not sure if there's if this has additionally been resonating with you. There's something you wanted to jump in and here on.
I think it's really it's refreshing, I think, in a way to hear, us take a step back and talk about this. On my drive in this morning, it's something I was sort of along these same topics. I'm thinking of how do we get, and I'll bring this up in news, I think, too, but how do we get, part of the problem with InfoSec in particular, I think, is we tend to talk within our little echo chamber. I think anyone listening to this podcast is probably going to be fairly familiar with SQLi, cross-site, all these sort of standard things, and hey, we need to do code reviews and blah, blah, blah. But I think the interesting part in what Cody there's two things he's talking around is how do we get that message out to the rest of the community, the rest of the organization? And then how do we make it easy? How do we make it seem friendly and non-threatening for them to come and either ask a question or learn how to do something, or in this particular case, try or get experience in responding to something without having the boss coming down your shoulder. So these are the parts of InfoSec which I think again, as Cody was saying, the engineers are the ones writing the product, the security people, but let's sort of take a step back and make it a little softer, a little more approachable. And I think that's really great the way he's talking about this.
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact quote, but I think our CEO said it really say we're doing a lot of this shift left talk, but I think it was like pull right, and really security needs to pull from some of the engineering principles, and we need to start get better at what we do because development kind of came around in the up operations, and now you have DevOps, and it's much more software engineering based. They're coming for security whether we like it or not, and we can start to pull from the things they do, or we can wait until they shift left right into the place of us.
Yeah, I think one of those key, engineering principles is literally just having a feedback loop, and that the concept of a feedback loop is, in everything from like electronic systems to communication systems. And one of the things that has also highlighted to me is there was a paper from Microsoft Security several years ago talking about ceremonies and describing ceremonies as a extension of a protocol design that includes people, meaning how do you design a system that includes people as a node and people that must explicitly do something. And even here, we're kind of talking about that when we're talking about whether it's even just deploying something like Signal Sciences or responding to alerts that might come from it and just saying, are these going to be alerts that are overwhelming? Are they completely irrelevant? Or are we putting some more, capability into the engineer's hand or the DevOps hands to be able to adjust thresholds for their system? So that's always been one thing too, that idea of ceremonies that I've always liked to call back to. I'm curious, Cody, we've talked a lot about SQL injection, cross-site scripting, lib injection based attacks. Is there something else that is really you wanted to highlight about Signal Sciences, or something coming over the next couple of weeks or months that you wanted to chat about?
Yeah, definitely. And this comes from that kind of the empathy thing is we wanted to figure out from our customers, like we made it very deployable. We made it very easy. We have an agent module. They can run as reverse proxy, and it's a software-based reverse proxy. And still customers are like, well, the module team, we couldn't get in there. And then the reverse proxy maybe didn't work for this environment. So we have upcoming is Cloud WAF, and it's just you point your CNAME at us, and then we'll run it upstream to you. So it's pretty much managed agents for everyone. So this is going to take down that barrier to entry significantly. This makes it like basically a one-line change in most environments that are set up that way. And then once that's done, you're piping it through SigSci, and then we'll route it to the application. And so I think we're just now wrapping up beta testing. They should be announcing it pretty soon. So keep an eye out for that stuff. It's going to make it ridiculously easy to try us out. And then a lot of customers that end up trying us out end up sticking with us. The realization once you open up the dashboard and you see traffic flowing through like that, and then the ability control that we give to security people, operations, and development, it blows a lot of our competitors out of the water. And then on the account takeover side, we have great protections around that. Again, that's around that threshold based operations. We got easy setup for very normal sort of account based actions like login attempts, registration attempts, successes and failures. And then also we have our professional services team that can help out with our advanced rules. And advanced rules can do a ton of different things. They can do time-based actions. They can compare IPs. You can encode and decode. Lots of opportunity for doing very complex business logic sort of attack protections or detections. So keep an eye out for any involvements in that area. And then we are in the future hoping to get a lot better client-side bot detection. So that's I don't even know how I was supposed to talk about it, but that is in our roadmap for sure, and something that we're obviously very well suited to do. And when you combine all those things together, where we're not just talking about SQL injection and cross-site scripting and really these sort of vanilla AppSec attacks, some of the more cool things that I've ever seen in application security have been either chained sort of attacks like that, or have been business logic abuse things. And those are things that you're not going to, with any product, get protections out of the box. But if you have the configurability to start to add signals, or basically the fidelity that you need to see where certain types of requests are happening, you can then evolve business logic intelligence to actually start to detect and block those types of attacks. They're very difficult for one to detect. Usually they're only detected after there's been like financial loss or something else. So yeah, keep an eye out for that Cloud WAF. And then any of the account takeover stuff, we do like blog posts and things on that. People are trying all sorts of different creative ways to detect things. And we have a few use cases up there that are great examples of where our account takeover protections like really extended beyond their purpose.
That's pretty cool. And I think John was already hinting at some interesting stuff that we're going to chat about in News of the Week. And talking about chaining exploits and account takeover, I think is going to give us a really good segue into that too, because there's a lot of really interesting things along that's far more consequential and far more entertaining, I think, than old school injection attacks. So yeah, I want to thank you, Cody, for taking this time with us and walking us through your background and giving us a chance to extol the virtues of actually being on the blue team side of things.
All right. Thanks for your time, Mike. It was great sharing with everyone. And then, yeah, sprky.co is my personal site. Contact info is on there as well. And then, yeah, Signal Sciences, we're hiring as well, too.
That's awesome. We'll throw that up in the wiki so people can come chat with you and learn about some more weird things about industrial safety and how it ties into AppSec. Thanks again, Cody.
Thanks, Cody.
All right. Thanks, Mike. You guys have a great day.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to return with News of the Week.